Hello everybody, Dr. Kevin Connors again. This is session 3 at a new look at cancer, and we're looking at how your tumor suppressor and your tumor oncogenes work. So we talked last week that immunity in cancer, normally your immune system should kill cancer cells, and normally that's actually what happens. Problem is that your immune system that's not really the main purpose of your immune system, is to kill cancer cells, because cancer cells are actually your normal cells that are in a rapid replication phase. So many times that doesn't happen. So we also have this other fail-safe method that God gave us called tumor oncogenes and tumor suppression genes. So tumor suppressor genes are genes that are really turn on in the case of a cancer growing to allow your immune system a better chance to kill that cancer. Tumor oncogenes turn on, these are bad genes, you could say, turn on in the presence of all sorts of things that we'll discuss, that and help the cancer to continue to proceed and grow. If you can think of a tumor suppressor gene as a brake pedal in the car, and the brake pedal in the car keeps the car from hitting that wall called cancer. So as long as the brake is down, the car never hits the wall called cancer, and a person never gets cancer. So that's what a tumor suppressor gene is. But there's all sorts of things that happen in our body, and things that we're exposed to in our environment, and things that we are exposed to in our food supply, and that we breathe in, that we absorb, toxins, chemicals, poisons, additives, colorings, all sorts of different bad things, that the reason why they're bad things is they activate what's called an oncogene. When they activate an oncogene, or what's called a proto-oncogene, they stimulate the car to go forward. So they're basically taking the brake off and revving up the engine. So even if you have adequate tumor suppressor genes, the brake isn't strong enough to when the gas is down. So the oncogene is the gas pedal, the suppressor gene is the brake pedal. So in order to keep the car from hitting the wall, you want the brake all the way down, but you can't have the gas all the way down also. You're going to slowly slide forward. And anything you do that decreases the brake pedal, you're going to go flying forward, and you're going to end up with cancer. So is your environment, does a person have cancer because of genes? Well, yes and no. A person has cancer because the environment affected their genes. So if they didn't have an environmental factor that decreased the suppressor genes and increased the oncogenes, they'd never get cancer. So what is cancer? The mutations of normal proteins that regulate cell growth, so that is stuck on, so they get this rapid replication phase. There's more than 100 known oncogenes right now. You may have heard a person has HER2 positive breast cancer. Probably one of the most common that you hear about. But it all has to do, is that genetic? Now am I going to get that? Well, no. It's actually what's called epigenetics. So your genes, I have a whole presentation on epigenetics. So if when you see that come up, I don't know where it is in the program, make sure you click on it. So I'm going to give you a brief overview here. There's only 25,000 human genes. Out of the millions and millions of cellular functions that are controlled by the gene markers, there's only 25,000 genes. Well, how is that? Shouldn't there be millions and millions of genes? Well, that's actually what we thought. There was going to be millions and millions of genes. When the human genome was mapped a few years ago, it was almost a humiliation, because every scientist that was saying that everything was genetic, well, this just didn't fit anymore. But what we found, though, is that environmental factors affect our genes. They affect the coding of the DNA so that it codes differently, and there's a different outcome based upon what is called for in the environment. So we're going to discuss some of these. So there's a whole new term that came out about a decade or so ago called epigenetics, meaning that Environmental effects on the DNA cause a change in the coding and change how our DNA function. So that's an epigenetic change, which can actually be passed down to our heirs. So I'll give you an example of a common epigenetic defect. There is a methylation pathway in your liver, which is a detoxification pathway, and it's dependent upon folate, natural folate, to run this methylation pathway. Now, detoxification pathways are quite essential because anything that you absorb into your body that circulates in your bloodstream that your body doesn't need, even if it's a good thing, it has to be detoxed by the liver. Certainly, our greater exposure of chemicals in our environment circulating through our blood because of smoke, things that we breathe in, chemicals on our clothing, in our carpets, in our household, in our cleaning supplies, in our food, additives, coloring, flavorings, all these things that are not God-made but are man-made go into our body and then have to detox through the liver detox pathways. Well, one of these pathways is called the methylation pathway. Genetically, it should function perfectly, but with the advent of chemicals, certain chemicals change this genetic structure, and now it is estimated that about 35% of the American population has a defect, a genetic defect, actually an epigenetical defect in the methylation pathway, and they would be termed slow detoxers because of this defect. Unfortunately, most theories believe that this epigenetic defect in the methylation pathway happened because of the use of synthetic folic acid. So during the 1920s and 30s, when white flour came out, by easily shunting off the outer hull of the wheat and exposing greater concentration of gluten, but also exposed a nice white fluffy substance that we call white flour that is stored easily and doesn't decay as fast as whole wheat flour, so it can be carried and shelf life goes way up and doesn't go bad on your shelf at home. So it became just the wonders of white flour and Wonder Bread became our staple diet. Well, one of the problems with taking the outer hull off the wheat is that that's really where most of the nutrition is. So then they started fortifying. So I grew up in the era where our cereal was fortified with essential vitamins and nutrients, so you grow up nice and strong. Unfortunately, this fortification was made with synthetic supplements, which folic acid was one of them. Synthetic folic acid causes an epigenetic defect in the folic acid pathway. Because it's dependent on a special type of folic acid, methyl tetrahydrofolate, folic acid is not that type, and it caused this defect that then is carried down into my offspring. So if I have this genetic defect caused from me consuming lots of folic acid, or my mother had this genetic defect because she took prenatal vitamins, which even to today are contained, what's contained in them is synthetic folic acid. Side note, don't take synthetic folic acid. It causes this epigenetic defect in a great percentage of the population. They actually pass it down genetically to the next generation. So we have these epigenetic changes. So something like HER2 positive breast cancer, is that a genetic defect? Yes, but in perfect scientific language, it's an epigenetic defect carried down because of different breakages in these pathways. So is there anything to do about this? Yes, we have a whole course on that, so just stay tuned. So that's part of how cancer grows. So tumor genes, these oncogenes, are highly expressed. So that is why some people are going to be more susceptible to cancer, because of epigenetical changes that they have a greater expression of tumor oncogenes. So they even need to be more careful on how they live their life. Are there tests? Are there genetic tests that you can test for your presupposition to cancer? Yes, there are. Do I run those tests? No, I don't. Are they good to run? Well, in a sense, they can be good to run because you can be scared straight. This is how you should eat. This is how you should live your life. This is the supplements that you should be taking because you have a X degree greater chance of developing cancer in your lifetime because of these epigenetic changes that you have in your tumor oncogenes. So in that sense, it's good. However, if I have to run a test to prove to you how you should eat, then you're going to the wrong doctor. So I personally don't run those tests. So what turns on these oncogenes? That's what we really want to know. We have these oncogenes present. They're possible for all of us. What turns them on? That's what we're going to talk about next week and the following next couple weeks. Conquering causes. All right. I'll talk to you soon.